Hello, I'm Dr. David Pincus, visiting professor in the MBA program at the Walton College of Business. It's my pleasure to host today's special Walton College of Business presentation of Meet the Leaders. We're honored to have as today's distinguished guest Dale Petroskey, president of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, New York. A Michigan native and thus understandably a long-suffering Detroit Tigers fan, he took over the leadership reins of the Hall of Fame in mid-1999 and has spearheaded an aggressive marketing and organizational restructuring effort designed to enlarge the Hall of Fame's public profile and social impact. Prior to his arrival in Cooperstown, he worked as Senior Vice President of Mission Programs for the nonprofit National Geographic Society in Washington, D.C. And before that, he held several positions in the federal government, including Assistant Secretary of Public Affairs in the U.S. Department of Transportation, and as a White House Assistant Press Secretary to President Ronald Reagan. Mr. Petroskey will be questioned by three Walton College students: finance major Patrick Hagge from Cabot, Arkansas; John Allen, a marketing major from Newport, Arkansas; and Guy McClain, a PhD student in accounting from Fayetteville, Arkansas. Let's begin with the first question from Patrick.
Well, first I'd like to extend our thanks in coming to the Walton College today, Mr. Petroskey. And I guess I'd like to start out with a question more back to your college days. Did you ever, or could you ever see yourself back then as a college student, not just, say, working with the Baseball Hall of Fame, but did you see yourself at all working in any type of sports industry?
I don't think so. You know, I was a journalism major at that time at Michigan State back in the mid to late 70s. I thought that I was going to go into journalism. I was interested in both print journalism and radio. And that's, I thought, what I would be doing, covering politics probably, and being interested in social issues of the day. And I never dreamed that I would end up in Cooperstown, New York.
All right, well, I've sort of read your biography, and you spent a lot of time in not-for-profit and government service. Could you talk a little bit about the Mayo Smith Society, a not-for-profit that you founded in Detroit, I believe, right? Well,
actually founded it in Washington, D.C. We arrived in Washington in 1981, and one of the great, I loved everything about Washington except the fact that nobody followed the Tigers in Washington, D.C. And in 1983, my brother had arrived in Washington by then to work on Capitol Hill as well. And we lamented the fact that the Washington Post didn't give enough space to the Tigers. And so we decided to form our own little club called the Mayo Smith Society, have a little logo with the Old English D and make Mayo Smith Society in Old English lettering, and distribute a memo to all the Michigan congressional offices on Capitol Hill and the 2 Senate offices from Michigan on Capitol Hill, inviting those staffers to breakfast on Friday morning in the Longworth House Office Building on the House side. And the only rule was that no politics were allowed to be discussed. We said we wanted liberal Democrats, conservative Republicans, everybody in between. The only mission of that breakfast on Friday mornings was to talk baseball, and more specifically talk about the Detroit Tigers. That started in March of 1983. Still going strong, about 1,500 members around the country and the world. We call ourselves loyal and knowledgeable Tigers fans. You get, dues are $17 a year now, and you get 6 newsletters a year, and we have a spring training trip to Lakeland, Florida to follow the Tigers, and we have an annual event at Tigers Stadium, now Comerica Park, a tour of the clubhouse to meet the players, and all the money goes to charity. We've given about $45,000 to charity in the last 6 years. And so it's a fun little organization, and if you're a Tiger fan and you're a member of the Mayo Smith Society, we know you're the real deal.
John?
It is my understanding that the Baseball Hall of Fame is trying to expand and to try to make itself more widely known throughout the United States and the world. Does the Baseball Hall of Fame have anything to offer to college students?
Yes, well, we have a college internship program, the Frank and Peggy Steele internship program, which was founded last year with a generous gift by Peggy Steele in honor of her husband, Frank, who passed away a couple of years ago. And about 25 students per summer come to Cooperstown for up to 12 weeks and work at the Hall of Fame. And if you're an accounting major, you work in the business end of things. If you're a retail major, you work in our gift shop. If you're in communications, you might work in our communications office. Something for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
We get about 250 applications a year for those 25 slots, so it's very competitive. We have students from throughout the United States, and they get paid $200 a week, and their housing allowance is $250 a month, and they stay at Hartwick College about 20 miles south of Cooperstown. So it's a wonderful experience for them and for us. We love having them there because they teach us a lot and they keep us young.
I guess to kind of add on John's question, how you all are trying to sort of spread the name, name recognition and sort of the key points of the Baseball Hall of Fame. If a viewer here could take just one important thing home, what's the most important thing that you would try to drive home into everyone in America about the Baseball Hall of Fame in general, about what it is, about their mission and goals?
I'd probably say it in two sentences. We are about three things: preserving history, honoring excellence, and connecting generations. And I would say that the Hall of Fame represents the best of baseball. It's the top of the pyramid. It's the glory of the game. And for the game to go into the future with any kind of strength, I think the Baseball Hall of Fame needs to be part of that equation, because we are the glory of the game, the glory of the past, and the future of the game needs to be built on the game's glorious past.
It seems you sort of have a mission to get the Baseball Hall of Fame out to the public, sort of out of Cooperstown, and you've mentioned earlier about the on-the-road type traveling thing. What sort of political ties are you using to get that out there? I know the president had the sort of a number of living Hall of Famers in the White House for a big ceremony. There are more things like that to sort of get the president or other politicians locally, nationally involved to sort of help your mission?
Well, I don't think any person or any organization can have too many friends. And I think you well know that this country is a complex country with a lot of constituencies. There's the private sector, there's the public sector, there's the nonprofit sector. We're in the museum world. And so we need friends in the public sector. Of course, the highest profile friend you can have in the public sector is the President of the United States, or United States senators, or congressmen, or people in states. A lot of private sector stars like Warren Buffett and Don Keogh and others are very important in getting the word out of the Hall of Fame. The media is important, and good friends of ours are Larry King and Billy Crystal and Joe Morgan, who's probably the biggest voice for baseball today, is a Hall of Famer who's vice chairman of our board. Then in the museum world, we need friendships at the best museums in the world, the Field Museum in Chicago, where we're going next, the American Museum of Natural History in New York. It's very important to have those friends. So, we're constantly in the business of friend raising. And when you're with the Hall of Fame, it's not that difficult, because an awful lot of people in this country love baseball and love to be associated with the best of baseball.
Dale, it might be worth clarifying here for those who don't know that the Hall of Fame is a separate entity from Major League Baseball, isn't it?
Yes, we are a nonprofit educational membership institution, independent from Major League Baseball. And I think it's important that we're independent, because it's we're just not a PR arm of Major League Baseball. We are very much stand on our own, and I think it's important for the game, and it's important for the fans.
Since it is independent, how are you able to be objective about the game, given the heavy emotional stock that so many put in to baseball?
I think our independence allows us to be objective. I'll give you an example. We hear an awful lot of questions and interest in Pete Rose. Pete Rose, is on baseball's ineligible list. And our board has said that Pete Rose will not be considered for the Hall of Fame if he's on Major League Baseball's ineligible list. That might seem like as a tie to Major League Baseball. It's really not. I mean, our board could have said nothing, and then we wouldn't have had a problem with it. But they feel strongly about it. It gives us a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of independence, and I think it's important. I think it's important for the game that we can call them as we see them.
John, I think you were next in line.
In the past few years that you have been with the Baseball Hall of Fame, what are the strengths and weaknesses that you can see in the organization?
Well, the strengths are that Cooperstown is sort of a household name in baseball fans' vocabularies. And people make the leap that Cooperstown is synonymous with the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Right.
Another strength is that we are in the most beautiful village in all of America. This beautiful little, tiny little village, 2,300 people on this beautiful lake in these rolling hills with 3 world-class museums in this little community, an opera house, a 5-star hotel, a championship golf course, one of the finest hospitals in the country. It's just an idyllic little place, not only to live, but to visit. And I know David's been there many, many times, and he agrees with that. We also have the strength of having living national legends affiliated with us. How many museums do you know that have living legends? Most people have long gone. But we have the Hank Aaron's and Bobby Doors and Carlton Fisks and Stan Musials and Lou Brocks to work with us and to be representatives for us. So those are great strengths for us. The weaknesses, which is so often the case, are also the strengths. Well, one is it's hard to get to. It's beautiful because it's out in the middle of nowhere, but it also is difficult to get to. So you really have to make a point of wanting to get there to make your way to Cooperstown. We've also been break-even for 63 years. We've never had an endowment. We're starting that now. But that's a weakness because financially we haven't been able to do some of the things that we should be able to do, having the name the Hall of Fame. We also, I think, haven't utilized our Hall of Famers as well as we could in the past. And by that I mean just haven't made them feel like part of a family and haven't educated them as to where we want to go. But we've done a lot of that in the last couple of years, and I think they really enjoy it, and we sure enjoy the relationship we have with them now.
Patrick, back to you.
Looking back on your tenure as president of the Baseball Hall of Fame, are there any, I guess, duties or responsibilities that you're surprised that you've had to undertake that when you came into the job in '99 that you had no idea that the president of the Hall of Fame would have to put up with?
Yeah, I've had a couple this week, as a matter of fact. A couple of employee situations that have arisen of a very personal nature. And I suppose that's true of any management position. One has to do with a marriage, and one had to do with one of my employees speaking out at a public meeting and sort of invoking his employment at the Baseball Hall of Fame when he shouldn't have. And so, you know, every day comes and you never know what's around the corner. I think I come into my office in the mornings knowing what I'm going to be doing, and often by 10 o'clock in the morning I'm taken off track and I'm doing something else. So I can control my time a little bit better in this job than I could in the White House, but not much better.
Could you speak a little bit about the governance structure of the Hall of Fame? Sort of who are the directors, where do they come from, how do they govern what you do, who governs the presentation of financial information, what you may use that for?
Sure. We have about 20 board members, and they are some major league owners. George Steinbrenner, Bill DeWitt of the Cardinals, John Harrington, who just sold the Red Sox to the group from Time Warner and John Henry, and David Glass of Walmart, who owns the Kansas City Royals. We also have some former Major League people like John McHale, who was the general manager in Montreal and the Milwaukee Braves before that. Bill Gladstone is the owner of a minor league team, the Troy Valley Cats. I guess they're called the Tri-City Valley Cats now in Troy, New York. We have several people from the Clark Estates. Jane Clark is the chairman of our board. Kevin Moore is the president of the Clark Estates. Ed Stack is a former president of the Clark Estates. The Clark Estates are the heirs to the Singer sewing machine fortune. And the Clark family has endowed Cooperstown through the years. In fact, Mr. Clark founded the Baseball Hall of Fame, the Farmers Museum, the Art Museum, the hotel, the golf course, the hospital. So really, Cooperstown probably should be called Clarktown. And the Clark Estates have a very, very big role in the running of all the entities in Cooperstown, and Jane Clark is the last surviving heir of that family, is the chairman of the board of the Hall of Fame. But we have about 20 members of the Hall of Fame, including, of the board of the Hall of Fame, including 5 Hall of Famers: Tom Seaver, Joe Morgan, Robin Roberts, Brooks Robinson, and Frank Robinson. So it's an interesting board, you know, but pretty heavily baseball. And I think what you'll see going forward maybe is a little bit more diversity on that board.
Dale, what is the board's role vis-a-vis your role, and how do you interact and play off each other with decisions?
We meet twice a year. The annual board meeting is during Hall of Fame weekend in late July or early August in Cooperstown when we're all back. We also meet in the winter. This year it's going to be in March in Jupiter, Florida, the site of the Cardinals spring training complex. And we're going to, Bill DeWitt is going to host it, and we're going to see a Cardinals game while we're down there, and that's the winter meeting. We also have a finance committee meeting once a year, and that's coming up in December. And anything that needs to be dealt with during periods other than those big meeting times, we work through the executive committee, which is made up of about five board members. The executive committee is sort of the, you know, quick decision group that we can run something by them and move along. I talk a lot to my board. I mean, I am in constant communication with my board. I send them things all the time to keep them in the loop on what's going on. I ask their opinion of things before I move forward on things. Certainly of Jane, who's our chairman. I'm in touch with her every day. But also with the others, just to pick their brains from time to time, because there's a wealth of information that they bring to those jobs.
It sounds like corporate America could take a lesson or two from the way it's going for you. John?
More on the fan base side, what has been your most memorable player introduction?
Could you rephrase that? I'm not sure that I quite understand.
What's your favorite player in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, wow. I have a lot of favorite players. Most of them are my favorite players. Growing up, Al Kaline was my favorite player because I was a Tiger fan growing up in Michigan. But I have a special place in my heart for Harmon Killebrew and Brooks Robinson and Lou Brock and Robin Roberts. And there's just so many wonderful people who are Hall of Famers in terms of baseball, but also figured out a long time ago how to live this life. You know, the definition of a Hall of Famer is excellence over time. And you don't get there by having 5 good years. You get there by having 12 or 14 great years. And in order to do that, you got to reinvent yourself. You got to be thinking all the time, because you're not the same player at the age of 35 as you were at the age of 22. You know, so you got to figure out how to do things a little bit differently. And so usually Hall of Famers are pretty smart guys because they've figured it out. They don't try to be the same player at 35 that they were at 22. They figure out how to do things a little bit differently. So most of them, I think, are people who know how to live their lives in a very sort of steady way. They know what's important, they know what's not important, they're focused, and we can all take a lesson from them. I've had an interesting opportunity to observe life at the ages of 50, 60, 70, and 80 as a guy younger than that. And it's taught me what I want to be like when I'm those ages and what I don't want to be like. Because not all of them have those great idyllic lives. You know, some of them have had bumps along the way. But there's ways, I think, that you can minimize the chances of going through some of those periods. And by paying attention to guys who have had a great career early in life and now have had to live the rest of their lives based on who they used to be as an athlete, there's a lot to be learned there.
Patrick, back to you.
Yes, sir. You've been successful in a great many areas and a great many types of careers and industries and such. If you could give one piece of advice to us, the random Walton College business student here, just one sort of fundamental key that would guide us through our lives, what would it be? I know that's kind of open-ended, but
I'll give you 2.
that sounds good.
Be nice to people. You can never have too many friends. Stay in touch with people. It's amazing how easy it is when you've stayed in touch with your friends and you pick up the phone and you need something, how fast the yes comes back. or when they call you and you can be helpful to them, how good it makes you feel. So I think it's very important to stay in touch and to really always try to reach out. That's one. The second is, and I just told this to a young person out in the reception beforehand, you've got to work when nobody's watching you. You know, I can't tell you the number of times I've been in my office at 2 in the morning or 5 in the morning. Nobody knows I'm there except me. And I'm only there because I've got work to get done. Okay? It's sort of like the kid who is the best jump shooter on the basketball team in high school. And he goes to practice from 3 to 5, and he comes home and has a bite to eat and does his homework. And he asked the coach for the key to the gym so he could go back after dinner and after homework so he could shoot for 3 more hours. And then the game comes on Friday night, and the people in the stands say, my God, how does he do that? How does he score 30 points a night? Well, they don't see the 3 hours a night, 5 nights a week he's putting into practicing. And I think a lot of people don't see the time you put in to hone your skills, to get good at something. So work when nobody's watching you. And the flip side of that, and it sounds contradictory, but it's not, is work as if everyone's watching you. So when you're working, work like all eyes are on you. So they're watching how you're acting, they're watching how you're treating janitors, guards. You know, my parents, I'll never forget this. My mom and dad came to Washington to the first time that I was working in the White House. And I, of course, had them in the Oval Office to meet the president, and they met Mrs. Reagan. When my dad went home, that wasn't the thing that impressed him the most. He would tell everybody, oh yeah. He said, what impressed me was that Dale knew the name of every security guard in the West Wing, and a lot about them, and they all knew a lot about him and his family. He said, that's what impressed us more than meeting the president and Mrs. Reagan, and that's the way I was taught. So you treat everybody the same, and I think it just makes for a more fulfilling life, too.
All right. Although you guys are independent from Major League Baseball, your popularity is going to sort of wane given the popularity of Major League Baseball today. And given their labor disputes, some would say that maybe football has overtaken baseball as America's favorite sport or pastime. What does the Hall of Fame have to do to sort of get back to those glory years of the 40s and 50s and 60s when baseball truly was America's pastime?
Well, I think that if we are able to strengthen ourselves financially, and I mean through an endowment and some of the other things we're doing, that will give us the resources we need to take a message to the American people about what the game has been, what it is, and what it can be again. And I think that we can insulate baseball in some ways from some of the things that are going on if we have the financial resources to, again, take the best of baseball to the American people and really show people that, and remind people, I guess, of what a wonderful game this has been, and it has been since they were little children. You know, I mean, Lee Mazzilli, the first base coach of the Yankees, I think said it best when he was named the coach for the Yankees. He said, every 51-year-old ought to have the chance to do what he loved to do when he was 7. And, you know, and I think what baseball does that. I mean, it makes us all 7 years old again or 8 years old again when life was simple and all you cared about was whether your team won or not that day. And I think if we have the financial resources, we can tell that story very effectively.
Dale, is it because folks are losing interest in baseball, or is it because the business of baseball has become so rough that some of the popularity has swooned?
I think baseball has a lot more competition for time than it did when we were young. You know, when we were young, baseball was king. There were 3 networks, and when I was growing up anyway, and there was the game of the week. And that's the only, it's ironic, you know, there was so little baseball on TV, but you all watched that game, you know. Now you can watch any game, any night, and it's too much. It's almost information overload. But that's true of everything. I think in kids' lives today, computers take time away from things, unfortunately. Other sports do that didn't in the past, didn't even exist. You know, skateboarding never existed to any degree when we were kids, or hockey in many parts of this country didn't exist, and I happen to love hockey, but in the South it didn't exist. Now kids are playing hockey in the South. Basketball, golf, you know, Tiger Woods has made golf a phenomenon for kids. And so there's only so much of the pie, and I think it's being divided up into little slivers now. It used to be baseball, football, basketball, and some places hockey. And so I think it's a function of time. I think the game, though, in the South is very strong. I mean, I see the kids who come to Cooperstown to play Little League Baseball, and they're coming from California, Texas, Florida, and boy, can they play. And they're playing 120 games a year to the exclusion of everything else. And the North, I think, because sports are much more specialized today, they play a lot less baseball, unfortunately. So I think it's becoming a little bit of a Southern versus Northern thing.
Interesting. John?
Where do you see the Baseball Hall of Fame 5, 10, even 20 years down the road?
I think you'll see it as much more in the front of the consciousness of the American people. I think people will be watching shows on the History Channel that are Hall of Fame shows. They may be seeing more books. You may even see a Broadway play that's tied to the history of baseball that has been written and produced by the Baseball Hall of Fame. I think you're going to see baseball being a lot more front of mind through the Hall of Fame than you have in the past. And I hope, by the way, at the same time, that people will still treat the trip to Cooperstown as the center of the bullseye. They still have to make that pilgrimage sometime in their life, but they're going to see us in many different iterations beyond that ring.
Patrick, we're running close to the end. Why don't you take the last question?
Okay. I guess sort of to add on John's question about the future of the Hall of Fame, if you could say, look into a crystal ball 20, 25 years down the road, can you tell me any sorts of conflicts or controversy? Excuse me, I can't talk here. I know you briefly mentioned how in the public's eye maybe there's the Pete Rose controversy right now. Do you think that say in the year 2025, what will be the sort of Pete Rose issue down the road? Is there any impending crisis in baseball that will carry over to the Hall of Fame decades from now?
I'm worried about the steroid issue.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no legitimate testing for steroids in baseball. And I can tell you Babe Ruth didn't use steroids, and Hank Aaron didn't use steroids. And most of the records that are in the Hall of Fame are not steroid-induced. Maybe none. And so that may be a controversy down the road. I don't know. I hope not, but it might be. I think that, by the way, let me just finish, Patrick. I think the only way to get at that is to have legitimate and mandatory testing for steroids and drugs in baseball. And I think the sooner the Players Union understands that it's a credibility issue, hopefully we can get there.
And so it is that all good things must come to an end. Unfortunately, our time has expired. I want to thank each of our panelists for your questions and your interest, and of course a special thanks to Dale Petroskey for joining us today on this edition of Meet the Leaders program. This program is produced by the Walton College of Business and directed by Jim Goodlander. And from the Sam Walton College of Business television studio, we thank you for watching.